But another one was a 2010 apparent robbery in Racine, Wisconsin. Apparently another black disciple had asked OTF Jam to go with him to rob somebody that his dad had sold with.
Lil Durks' lawyer just embarrassed OTF Jam in court. One of Durks' own childhood friends took the stand to testify against him and walked away looking like the least credible person in the room. OTF Jam finally sat in that witness chair, pointed at the man he once called family, and Brian Steele dismantled him in front of the entire courtroom. What's Steele exposed about the way this witness was built by federal investigators may be the most important thing that has happened in this trial so far. Stay with us because what happened when Steele stood up is far more serious than any viral clip could capture. Yo, what's good, fam? Today we are breaking down OTF Jam's testimony in Lil Durks' federal murder for hire trial. While the prosecution is betting so much on what a childhood friend says on that stand, what Brian Steele did when he got his shot at Jam's credibility, how the exhibit confusion and mistrial requests went down, and what the defense still needs to accomplish before this trial is over. Let's get into it. Before we get into the courtroom fireworks, let us establish what this trial is actually about. Federal prosecutors allege that Lil Durk, born Dirk Devontae Banks, participated in a murder for hire conspiracy targeting rapper Quando Rondo following the November 2020 killing of King Von in Atlanta. King Von was one of Durk's closest friends and one of the most important artists in the Only the Family collective. Prosecutors say Durk was consumed with revenge after losing him and that he used resources connected to his music management company Astronaut Sounds to organize and finance a retaliation campaign. The government alleges he placed a bounty of up to $1 million on Quando Rondo. That alleged campaign ended on August 19, 2022, when men connected to Only the Family tracked Quando Rondo to a gas station near the Beverly Center in Los Angeles and opened fire. Quando Rondo survived. His 24-year-old cousin, Xavier Robinson, known as Lil Pab, did not survive. Lil Durk has pleaded not guilty to all charges. The government must prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt, and the jury has not yet reached a verdict. Everything prosecutors are presenting right now is their theory of what happened, being tested in that courtroom every single day. Casey Hester is not a peripheral figure in this story. He is a longtime associate and childhood friend of Lil Durk. He grew up inside the OTF world in the same neighborhood around the same people who are now central to this federal case. He knew the conversations, the relationships, the dynamics, and the internal culture of Only the Family in a way that no surveillance camera or financial record can replicate on its own. That kind of access is exactly what federal prosecutors look for when building a case that depends on connecting a defendant to the people and decisions surrounding an alleged conspiracy. Documents and phone records can show that certain things happen. A flight log shows travel, a text message shows communication, a financial record shows spending. But an insider witness can potentially tell the jury what all of those things meant, what was said in private, and who was allegedly in the room when the decisions were made. Jam was not recruited off the street. He was someone who had been inside Durk's world for years before any of this began. And that proximity is precisely what makes his cooperation both powerful for the government and devastating for Lil Durk personally. This is not a stranger pointing the finger. This is someone from the same childhood, the same circle, the same story, but that same closeness is also where the defense's strategy begins. Jam has already pleaded guilty in connection with this case. He is cooperating with federal prosecutors in exchange for the possibility of a more favorable outcome at sentencing. That dynamic is not a secret. It was disclosed to the jury from the beginning of the trial, and it gives the defense one of the clearest and most powerful arguments available in any federal cooperation case. When a witness stands to benefit from telling a story that helps the government, the defense can argue that the witness has the most powerful incentive in the legal system to shape that story in whatever direction keeps prosecutors satisfied. Prosecutors have not made any documented promise about a specific sentence reduction. But cooperation can become relevant at sentencing, and both the jury and the defense understand exactly what that means. A man facing serious federal time who was helping the government build a case against his former childhood friend has something very real at stake in how convincingly he performs on that witness stand. That is not a claim that Jam is lying. It is a legal argument that the jury should think carefully about what motivated him to walk into that federal courtroom and say what he said. And it is an argument Steele is going to press from every possible angle. Now let us get into what Jam actually told the jury, because this is the testimony the prosecution has been building towards since the investigation began. According to his account on the stand, Jam described an alleged OTF gathering after King Von's death in which Lil Durk made clear that whoever went after Quando Rondo or Lil Tim would be financially taken care of. Jam testified about the alleged discussion of a bounty, describing how people in the room asked about the amount, whether it was $500,000 or $1 million, and that Durk's response was essentially whatever, meaning the money was available and the ceiling was not the issue. Jam also testified about an alleged payment of approximately $50,000 connected to the release of Durk's song Back Again, which prosecutors say represented compensation tied to loyalty and involvement in the alleged conspiracy. Taken together, that testimony is designed to do one specific thing for the government. It puts Lil Durk personally inside alleged conversations where retaliation was promised, money was committed, and people were being rewarded for participation. Without Jam's account of those private moments, the government's case relies more heavily on documents and surveillance that cannot speak for themselves. Jam is the voice prosecutors need to make the other evidence mean what they say it means. Let us be precise about what the defense is arguing here, because it matters for understanding why the 30 interview number is so damaging. The defense is not simply claiming that investigators lied to Jam or that his testimony was invented. The argument is more surgical than that. When a witness sits with federal investigators approximately 30 times over months or years, and 27 of those sessions are never recorded, the jury has no way to go back and compare what the witness said in interview one to what they are saying on the stand right now. If the story evolved, sharpened, or shifted in ways that were more useful to prosecutors over time, that evolution is completely invisible to everyone in that courtroom. The detective acknowledged on the stand that choosing not to record most of those interviews was a matter of government preference. Steele is asking the jury to sit with that preference and think about what it means when they are being asked to send a man to prison for the rest of his life, based partly on testimony that was developed across 30 conversations, most of which no one will ever be able to hear. The question Steele wants in the jury's mind is simple. Is what Jam is saying today the same thing he said the very first time he sat across from a federal investigator? And if it is not, how would anyone in that room ever know? Now let us talk about the moment that triggered the mistrial request, because the setup matters as much as the ruling. During the prosecution's direct examination of Jam, prosecutors were walking him through specific pieces of evidence using exhibit numbers. At a key point in the questioning, the prosecutor referenced an exhibit number that did not match the exhibit actually being displayed or discussed. Jam appeared to agree with the prosecutor's characterization anyway, nodding along and confirming the framing, even though the exhibit number being cited was incorrect. Brian Steele was immediately on his feet. He objected forcefully, arguing that the prosecution was improperly leading its own cooperating witness, essentially feeding Jam answers through mislabeled questions rather than allowing him to testify independently from his own memory. The defense argued this was not a clerical mistake. It was the prosecution guiding a witness who has spent 30 largely unrecorded sessions being prepared for exactly this moment. Steele pushed further and asked the court to declare a mistrial, arguing the conduct had crossed a line that made a fair continuation of the proceedings impossible. Judge Michael W. Fitzgerald denied the mistrial request. He allowed prosecutors to correct the exhibit confusion and continue questioning Jam. The trial did not stop, the jury did not leave. The case moved forward, but the episode left something in that room that Steele wanted the jury to carry with them. A mistrial motion is a serious legal request asking a judge to end the current proceeding on the grounds that a legal error has made a fair trial impossible. When Steele raised it, he was signaling to the court and to the jury that he believed the government was guiding its own witness through his testimony. When the judge denied it, he ruled that the error could be corrected and the trial could continue fairly. Both things can be true simultaneously. The request can be denied and still serve its purpose. The image of a prosecutor asking about the wrong exhibit and a cooperating witness agreeing with the characterization anyway does not disappear from the jury's memory just because the judge allows the case to move forward. Steele put that moment in the record because he knew it would stay there. That is the moment everyone is calling the embarrassment. And it is worth being honest about what that word actually means in this context. Brian Steele did not make Jam cry on the stand or catch him in a lie so obvious that the jury gasped and the courtroom went silent. What Steele accomplished was more precise and ultimately more dangerous for the prosecution. He put a moment in front of the jury where the government's star cooperating witness appeared to follow the prosecutor's lead rather than testify from his own knowledge and memory. In a case that depends on the jury trusting Jam's account of private conversations and alleged instructions he says he heard directly from Lil Durks, a moment where Jam agrees with whatever the prosecutor puts in front of him, even when the exhibit number is wrong, creates a specific and durable kind of doubt, not proof of a lie, doubt. And in a federal case where the government carries the burden of proving its allegations beyond a reasonable doubt, doubt is exactly what the defense is manufacturing. Now let us talk about Jam's demeanor in that room, because it matters to understanding the atmosphere of what happened on that witness stand. Reporting from inside the courthouse described Jam as visibly distressed at points during his testimony. He was seen shifting uncomfortably in the witness chair during certain exchanges, shaking his head and covering his face during breaks in the proceedings. Body language in a courtroom is not evidence. A witness can appear nervous for 100 different reasons that have nothing to do with whether they are telling the truth. But Jam's demeanor matters for a different reason. Think about what he is actually doing in that room. He is sitting in a federal courthouse testifying against someone he has known since childhood, in front of that person's family, in front of 12 strangers who are going to decide the rest of Durks' life, and in front of one of the most aggressive cross-examiners in the country who is watching every word he says and waiting for his turn. He pleaded guilty to his own involvement in the alleged conspiracy. He has been through approximately 30 investigative interviews. He has been preparing for this moment for months, and he is still visibly showing the strain of it. Whatever you think about his motivations or the reliability of his testimony, the pressure of sitting in that chair and publicly describing what you say you witnessed about someone from your own past is something that leaves a mark on a person. The defense will argue his discomfort reveals guilt. The prosecution will argue it reveals the courage of doing something genuinely difficult. The jury gets to decide. Now let us talk about exactly what Durks' lawyers need to accomplish to discredit OTF Jam, because this is the heart of the defense strategy. Steele does not need to prove that Jam fabricated everything from scratch. That is a high bar and an unnecessary one. What he needs is far more surgical. He needs to show the jury enough inconsistency, enough self-interest, and enough institutional pressure in how Jam's testimony was developed that they cannot rely on it with the confidence a guilty verdict requires. The defense has several tools available. The 30 interviews with only 3 recordings means Steele can ask Jam about specific details of his account and suggest those details were shaped, clarified, or refined across sessions the jury will never be able to hear. The guilty plea and cooperation agreement means Steele can put Jam's personal legal situation directly in front of the jury and ask them to consider whether a man facing serious federal time has a powerful reason to tell prosecutors exactly what they want to hear. The exhibit confusion during direct examination gives Steele a concrete moment to point to as an example of a witness agreeing with whatever the prosecutor puts in front of him rather than testifying from independent memory. And any inconsistency between what Jam told investigators at earlier stages and what he is saying now on the stand becomes another brick in the wall Steele is building around Jam's credibility. All of it together is what the defense needs. Not a confession, just enough doubt. Now let us connect Jam's testimony to the broader evidence prosecutors are presenting, because this trial is not a one-witness case. The government has put digital communications, flight records, financial records, surveillance footage, and evidence from the Astronaut Sounds business operation in front of the jury. Prosecutors also confirmed that OTF Jam reportedly wore a wire in connection with the 2023 gun case, which may have helped facilitate his cooperation with federal investigators. That detail, if fully established at trial, will be another target for the defense, because it raises questions about the timeline of his cooperation and what conversations he may have recorded before anyone in Durks' circle knew he had become an informant. Prosecutors also introduced a text message in which Durk allegedly wrote after King Von's death that losing Von had turned him into a different animal. That message is part of the emotional core of the government's motive argument, and it sits alongside Jam's alleged account of the bounty meeting as 2 pieces of the same portrait of a man driven by grief to allegedly commission a murder. The defense is going to challenge both pieces and everything in between. The defense is attempting to break that portrait apart, and their primary tool is Kayvon Grant, also known as OTF Bonnie. Brian Steele and his team have argued throughout this trial that Grant is the person who organized and executed the Los Angeles operation. Grant was present when King Von was killed in Atlanta. He allegedly participated in an earlier attempt on Quando Rondo's life in Georgia in May 2021. He had access to the Astronaut Sounds business credit card and allegedly used it to book hotel rooms, rental vehicles, and travel connected to the August 2022 attack. He was Durks' personal assistant with direct knowledge of the finances and operations of the entire circle. He had the motive, the access, the operational knowledge, and the documented physical presence at multiple key moments in this story. The defense's argument is that Grant organized this himself, that he had deeply personal reasons for wanting retaliation after King Von's death, and that once federal investigators closed in and kicked down his door in October 2024, he looked around for the most valuable name he could offer in exchange for a lighter sentence. According to the defense, that name was Lil Durk. For the jury, the question is whether that alternative explanation creates enough doubt about the government's version of who gave the order. The defense has also highlighted the absence of a concrete financial record directly showing Lil Durk personally paying OTF Jam or any other alleged participant specifically for the 2022 Los Angeles operation. That absence does not disprove the prosecution's case. Federal conspiracy cases regularly result in convictions built on testimony and circumstantial evidence without a single document showing the payment changing hands. But the defense can stand in front of that jury and argue that what the government is asking them to do is convict a man of murder for hire, a charge that carries a mandatory life sentence. Based heavily on the word of a cooperating witness who had 30 largely unrecorded meetings with investigators, who pleaded guilty to his own involvement in the alleged conspiracy, and who has everything to gain from telling a story that satisfies the people who hold his future in their hands. That is not proof that Jam is lying, but it is a reasonable argument that the jury should weigh every word he said with that reality in mind. Let us talk about the other cooperating witnesses too, because the pattern still has established matters beyond just Jam. OTF Vonnie, Kayvon Grant, was interviewed approximately 10 times by federal investigators, with none of those sessions recorded. Flacca, Keith Jones, sat through approximately 15 interviews with only one on tape. Steele raised these numbers during his cross-examination of the lead detective to establish that the pattern of largely unrecorded interviews was not an anomaly specific to Jam. It was a consistent feature of how investigators built their entire network of cooperating witnesses across this case. His argument to the jury is not that any single unrecorded interview proves misconduct. It is that when you look at 30 interviews and 3 recordings for Jam, 10 and 0 for Vonnie, 15 and 1 for Flacca, you are looking at a systematic approach that makes it structurally difficult for the jury to evaluate how much any of these accounts changed between the first conversation and the witness chair. Prosecutors can argue that consistency across multiple witnesses demonstrates reliability. Steele can argue that consistency across multiple unrecorded witnesses demonstrates coordination. The jury has to decide which argument they find more persuasive when weighing testimony against the rest of the evidence. The trial is far from over, and what comes next in Jam's examination will be one of the most closely watched legal moments in recent memory. Steele has not yet finished his cross-examination of Jam, and the issues he is expected to press are already mapped out by everything established so far in these proceedings. The 30 interviews and 3 recordings, the guilty plea and the cooperation agreement, the exhibit confusion during direct examination, and Jam's apparent willingness to follow the prosecutor's lead, the alleged inconsistencies between what Jam told investigators at different points and what he has told the jury, the $50,000 back again payment allegation, and what the defense says it actually represents, the absence of a direct financial record connecting Durk to a personal payment for the alleged Los Angeles operation. Each of those is a door Steele can push open during cross-examination, and what comes out on the other side of each one will determine whether Jam ends up strengthening or seriously damaging the government's case, with the 12 people whose decision is the only one that matters in that courthouse. The chronology of how we got here is worth laying out clearly one final time so the full picture sits in front of you. King Von killed in Atlanta in November 2020, and the alleged retaliation clock starts ticking. The alleged retaliation motive begins building inside OTF. May 2021. An alleged earlier attempt on Quando Rondo's life in Georgia, August 19, 2022. The Los Angeles shooting that killed 24-year-old Lil Pab and transformed this case from street news into a federal investigation. Investigators building their case through 2022 and into 2024. OTF Jam reportedly wearing a wire in connection with a 2023 gun case, potentially feeding information to investigators before anyone in Durk's circle realized what was happening. Lil Durk arrested in October 2024 while allegedly attempting to leave the country. The trial beginning in August 2026, with 3 cooperating witnesses who have all pleaded guilty and are prepared to testify. Jam taking the witness stand as protective witness number 1, telling the jury about alleged bounty meetings and financial rewards. The exhibit confusion, Steele's forceful objection, the mistrial request, Judge Fitzgerald's denial, and the ongoing cross-examination that will determine whether the government's most important cooperating witness holds together or begins to unravel under the pressure of one of the most skilled cross-examiners in the country. At the end of it all, the title of this video says, Lil Durk's lawyer just embarrassed OTF Jam. What happened in that courtroom was more complicated and more consequential than embarrassment. It was a precise legal attack on the foundation of a witness the government has been preparing since before this trial began. Prosecutors brought Jam forward as protective witness number 1 because they believe his insider account of what happened inside OTF after King Von's death is something no document, no flight record, and no financial transaction can fully replace on its own. He was allegedly in the room. He allegedly understood what they meant and what would follow. That is the testimony the government needs to connect the grief of 2020 to the alleged murder for hire of 2022. The defense is now attempting to make the jury question whether that account was built, refined, and shaped across 30 largely unrecorded meetings until it said exactly what prosecutors needed it to say, and whether the man delivering it has enough of his own freedom on the line to have constructed a version of events that serves his own interests as much as the government's. Neither side decides who wins that argument. 12 jurors do. They are still in that room, listening to every word, watching every witness, and weighing everything they hear against what the law requires the government to prove. Drop a comment and tell us what you think about OTF Jam's testimony. Whether you believe Steele did enough to damage his credibility, and where you think this trial is heading from here, and tap in on the video on screen for everything else we have been covering on this case.